Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us and thank you for being here today. Happy to have everybody being here for this discussion about narcissism. I'm excited to have this conversation. So go ahead and say hello in the comment section and let us know where you're watching us from and how everybody's doing this morning on this wonderful Monday morning. So today, like I said, I'll be talking about narcissism. And this is based on questions that we've received on Facebook and Instagram, but you'll also have your own chance to ask your questions towards the end. So we'll have an opportunity for questions because this is a live question and answer opportunity. So make sure you have your questions all written and ready to go. And so just really quickly, if you're not familiar with me, my name is Nafisa Sekandari. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist specializing in anxiety-based disorders. I've also had a few personal and professional encounters with narcissists in my life, so I'll be talking about that as well. And then today, I'm being joined by Hosai Mojaddidi. She is not only my cousin, but also the co-founder of mentalhealthformuslims.com, which we formed together back in 2009. Hosai is a published author and lecturer. She's also a mother of 2 boys, a mental health advocate, and works extensively with the Muslim community. Before I bring Hosai in, I want to mention that we'll be doing things a little differently today. And we'll be having Hosai be in the interview seat, and she'll be interviewing me today. But we'll also be co-hosting together to answer your questions. So this interview actually came about because Hosai has been asked by multiple people about narcissism. This is an issue that affects a lot of people. I see it a lot in practice. And so Hosai was asked by several people, so we put this together. And so we'll be answering questions, and we decided to give you guys what you wanted, and this is what you asked for. So if there are any future presentations or topics that you'd like to for me to cover or for the both of us to cover, just go ahead and also share that in the comment section as well. So let me bring Hosai in. Hello, Hosai. How are you?
Good morning. Salam alaikum. Hello. How is everyone? How are you?
I'm good. How are you? I heard you guys had some nice thunderstorms recently. How are you guys doing?
Alhamdulillah. I'm doing well. We had our beach day relief yesterday. We went to the beach to get away from the heat. But yeah, it was intense. The night before, 3 o'clock in the morning, with 80, 90 degree, really intense humid weather, there was suddenly a thunderstorm, lightning storm that lasted all the way until about 10, 11 in the morning yesterday, but I was like, we're just going to head to the coast, and alhamdulillah, it was a beautiful day by the beach. So I encourage everybody, if you're in the heat and if you have access, try to get to some of these beaches. You'll find relief.
And if you live in Arizona like me, find a cool spot to get into. It is hot weather all over the place right now. So how are you guys doing? Let us know how you guys are doing in your neck of the woods, but welcome everybody, and welcome Hosai. So I'll let you take over.
Sure. So first of all, thank you so much for inviting me for this discussion. As you said, I'm the one who actually asked you because I know you're very busy. You have a lot going on. You have clients, you have your own practice. But this topic is probably one of the ones that I think in our community, and possibly, just in general, is very misunderstood because there's so much misinformation. And, some of these terms have become very popular through social media and through film and other, media, that people learn about them early, but they might not be clear about what it actually is, how to read the signs of it, and whether or not it can be treated. So there's so much misinformation as well. And that's why I thought it was going to be really helpful and useful for everybody out there who might have, someone who might be dealing with someone who they think is a narcissist, to just have accurate information from a trained professional like yourself to know whether or not are they just misreading certain things, or is it in fact something that needs to be looked at more seriously. So that's why I asked you if you'd be willing to do this, and that you were so gracious with your time. So thank you for that. And I hope, again, I did send you. I sent you the questions that I received personally. So what I'd like to do is, in the time that we have together, just sort of look at the questions I received, and then, take the questions from the audience as they come in. So let me know when you want me to start. I'm happy to do that. As soon as you're ready, I'm ready.
Okay, so I'm going to start off with a little overview of a presentation, like make it a little formal, and then hopefully I did take your questions from Instagram and try to incorporate them into my presentation. But if any question is not answered, please feel free to comment and let us know. We'll try and bring in your comments and answer them. So I'm going to start by sharing my screen. And then we'll go ahead and start here.
Okay.
So today we're going to be talking about narcissism. And let me see. So the most common understanding of narcissism is people who tend to have a grandiose sense of self-importance, a lack of empathy for others, a need for excessive admiration, and the belief that they're unique and deserving of special treatment. Do you guys know anybody like that? I'm sure we all know several well-known individuals that meet this definition, right? So let me... So narcissism and a narcissistic personality disorder varies somewhat. Most people who meet the definition of narcissism can also have those traits if they have a personality disorder, but not all people who have a personality, who have the narcissism have a personality disorder. I hope that makes sense. So
Yeah.
a lot of the people with narcissistic tendencies can have a personality disorder, but not everybody that has narcissistic tendencies has a personality disorder. I also like to look at this problem that's on the narcissism as on a spectrum, where there might be those selfie-loving people on the lower end of the spectrum and the severe cases on the higher end of the spectrum. So it's estimated that about 1% of the population has a clinical and pathological narcissistic personality disorder, or NPD. I'm not sure how much I believe this, since a lot of the people that have NPD may never officially get diagnosed due to their belief that they don't have a disorder and may never seek help. You also won't get diagnosed with this disorder unless the NPD is causing a significant level of distress or impairs your daily functioning. So people... my problem with personality disorders is that people who usually have a personality disorder are not the ones that are bothered by their personality disorder. And so they will never get help or get diagnosed. So regardless of what we may think or how much their behavior is bothering us, most of them are doing just fine and don't even think that they have a problem. And so this is what makes getting treatment or changing behavior really difficult. So So you have to, in order to get help for anything, you have to first recognize and acknowledge the problem before you can change it. And most people with narcissism don't see a problem and may never change. One of the ways to know you're dealing with a personality disorder is that they're driving everyone around them crazy, but they're not bothered by their behavior at all. They also tend to be externally focused and end up blaming everyone else for their problems while never taking any responsibility for their behavior. So my goal for today's presentation isn't to change the person who is a narcissist, but to help you recognize the traits and learn how you can protect yourself. So anyway, let's go back to the narcissism. Grandiosity, lack of empathy, and a deep need for admiration are the hallmark features of narcissism. People who are narcissists tend to feel entitled, can be oppositional, and emotionally unavailable. They often believe that they're better looking than others, even if other people rate them as less attractive. They also enjoy belittling other people and enjoy controlling other people. They can be ruthless in getting their needs met, but mostly at the expense of other people. So those are the negative traits of narcissism, but narcissists can also be very charming and create an illusion of success and achievement. They can love bomb you to get your attention, but usually people find that after they start getting involved with a narcissist, that they can't get their emotional needs met because the narcissist is usually emotionally unavailable. So narcissists tend to be serial romantics and tend to fall in and out of love pretty quickly and easily, usually with people that they don't know very well. Initially, they'll make their partner feel perfect and adored until reality sets in and they realize that their partner has flaws or imperfections. And that's when they usually end their relationship. They're usually unfaithful and can't hold on to relationships for long. For this reason, psychologists have found that the 4-month mark is usually typically when those dating narcissists can see their true colors, and an average relationship usually lasts about 4 months. For a narcissist, everything has to be perfect, and they're attracted to people they think has a high status, which they hope will rub off on them. They tend to choose friends or lovers to make them look good or gain some kind of advantage in life. The reason so many people suffer in the presence of a narcissist is because of how they impact the lives of those they interact with. People who get involved with narcissists have experienced gaslighting, manipulation, scapegoating, rage, verbal and physical abuse, emotional abuse, and antagonistic behavior. It doesn't matter what you look like, how smart you are, how educated you are, or how rich you are. You're all at risk for falling under the charms of a narcissist if you don't know what to look for. I've known psychologists that have suffered at the hands of narcissists, and we're supposed to know better. Narcissists are usually very charming, charismatic, and very likable initially, so they're very easy to fall for. Unfortunately, their inherent problem with empathy may prevent them from really understanding the feelings of another person and developing a healthy long-term relationship. Sadly, it's nearly impossible for people with a narcissistic personality disorder to fall in love and build a trusting and equal partnership. People who have a history of unresolved emotional trauma from a narcissistic parent usually attract narcissistic relationships. Since the chance of changing the narcissistic person's behavior is low, it's important that those on the receiving end of the narcissistic abuse receive treatment, get educated about what narcissistic abuse looks like, and get their experience validated. Going to therapy with a narcissistic partner is usually not productive because narcissists love psychology and therapy because they use it to further manipulate their partner or others for gain. I've also heard how they manipulate the therapist to their side. If you're in therapy due to narcissistic abuse and therapist doesn't really understand you or help you understand the patterns involved in a narcissist, this is such a tongue twister, narcissistic abuse, and doesn't support and empower you and help you deal with the grief and shame, as well as give you resources and protect you, then they're not giving you the help that you need. In case of narcissistic abuse, you may also need trauma therapy to help you overcome the narcissistic abuse. I know many of you asked if it's possible to get help for narcissists, and the answer is usually not. I know many therapists won't even work with someone that's a narcissist because therapy won't go anywhere. So my goal is always to work with the victims and empower them to learn very firm boundaries and treat their trauma related to the narcissistic abuse. Before I go on, I want to talk briefly about gaslighting since it's so directly linked to narcissism. So gaslighting is a way narcissists make you question your reality, your sanity, and even yourself. So here are some examples of what gaslighting sounds like. You might hear stuff like, you're always twisting things, or you're imagining things. They often say, don't get upset over nothing, or don't be so sensitive. They'll make you feel like you're crazy and will accuse you of lying despite having the evidence right in front of them. It's scary that some people can easily manipulate and take advantage of people. So it's really important to learn that the emotional manipulation tactics are so that what they are so that you can defend yourself from others abusing you. Usually when we're frequently being gaslighted, we begin to question ourselves and doubt the truth, even if it's staring us in the face. Having a support system is very important because narcissists love to isolate their victims so that they have more control. So it's important to have a social support system to keep you grounded. If you've been hurt by gaslighting, I would highly recommend you get professional help to help you deal with it. Remember that at the end of the day, you only have control over your reactions, and taking care of yourself and setting firm boundaries is the best way to deal with a narcissist. So if you're being gaslit, ask yourself if that person should be in your life. If this person is a parent or family member, you can be cordial with them, but still set very, very firm boundaries to protect yourself. And we can talk more about this in a minute. So I want to end this little mini presentation with a quote. An abnormal reaction to an abnormal situation is normal behavior. Viktor Frankl said this, and this is so important because a lot of times when you're in a narcissistic relationship, you feel like you're the one going crazy and your reactions are just not matching what you're seeing. And so that actually, given the abnormal situation of dealing with a narcissist, is a normal reaction. So let me stop sharing and we can get back to the presentation. So that was my little brief introduction to it. So we can go ahead and talk more about, if you have questions, let me see if there are any comments or questions coming up. Hello from Toronto. I went too fast. I'm sorry. If there are any questions that you have, please let me know. Oh, I'm sorry that the slides were blurry. Did you see them as blurry too? I'm hoping that the recording will not be blurry. So if you guys have any questions, now's the time to put and this will be saved. I will be saving this. You can see it in the replay on Facebook, on YouTube. You can also, we'll also put it on Instagram and the IGTV, so you can have all the information. I'm sorry if I went through it. I just want to make sure I'm getting as much in so that we have time for your questions. So did you want to say anything, Lucy? Did you have any questions?
Yes, first of all, thank you. Thank you so much for that presentation. It was very eye-opening, a lot of great information. And I'm sure for those who are watching who may have not tied some things together, you were able to elucidate that very concisely. So wonderful presentation. And like Dr. Nafisa said, we save all these recordings. So don't worry if you missed anything. Once it's saved, you can always go back in the replay, pause, and hopefully see that. But on my side, the slides were clear, so it might just be a browser issue or an internet connectivity issue, which usually that's the case. But hopefully that can get resolved. As far as the content, wow, there's so much. My mind is going kind of all over the place because I'm looking at things from from a spiritual lens, because that's what I do. You do clinical psychology, I do spiritual counseling. And as this issue comes to me, as I shared with you before, a lot of times I think people are seeking to gain control of the situation. Like, how can I either coexist with this person? How can I change them? And so there's so much, and it's all obviously coming from a good place. These people have charming, good qualities, so they are lovable. It's not that they're, completely repellent. They have good qualities, redeemable qualities. But in addition to that, it comes with a price, right? Which is you're likely going to deal with many of the symptoms that you just shared with us. So people, I think, feel frustrated because it's not rosy, it's not what they want. And so I always like to, when I'm offering, spiritual counseling, remind people. So let's focus first on the marital relationship. If you're married to someone who you believe to be a narcissist after, maybe your own independent research and what Dr. Nafisa presented here, from the Islamic perspective, this is where you have to have a real serious internal conversation with yourself, because there's so many cultural ideas that we have that I think we confuse with religion. But you have to have a serious conversation with yourself that, is this something that you can see long-term sustaining as is? Because, unlike maybe other faith traditions, yes, there is certainly a focus in Islam on trying to preserve the marriage and making sure you do everything in your power to preserve a marriage. But if you find yourself with someone who is basically, treating you or abusing you in this way and making you, kind of lose your mind on a daily basis, this is where you have to have that internal conversation. But is this something that I'm willing to put up with, or put my children through if you have children, and not let a cultural sort of because again, many of our cultures, they're and it's for good reason, and we don't want to take the issue of divorce lightly. So people sometimes make rash decisions and, well, I don't like it, or I'm not happy with this person, I'm just going to divorce them. We don't certainly condone that behavior. Things have to be done in a thoughtful way. You have to seek help. You have to go through those, natural sort of, the process of really trying to save your marriage. And if you don't do that because you feel like, well, divorce is the easier path, then that's blameworthy. And so that's why many of our cultures are always, doing, putting it or really, what's the word? I'm sorry, I'm losing my words, but they're against divorce because they find that people get very impetuous with their decisions. It's an emotional thing, right? So I don't want to in any way suggest that that's what you should do. It's more that you should ask yourself, can you sustain your relationship as is? And if you can't, if you feel like you're already just spent and emotionally exhausted and it's becoming too difficult for you, then as Dr. Nafisa said, which I think is something to really consider, you cannot change this person, right? You can't. So that means you have to adapt to them or just tolerate them if you want to maintain the marriage. And if you feel that they're not willing to get help, and you've tried, because I see so much suffering in our community from people who've been in these types of toxic situations where they spend years trying to do everything in their power to change their partner and hoping that their goodwill, their efforts will somehow change them. But they keep coming back broken and broken and broken because they're trying, but marriage is not one-sided. So I feel like we have to have more serious conversations and let people know that there are other options. And if those options, you need to, open your mind to those options and say, well, either it's me continuously suffering for the next 20, 30 years with this person and putting, again, my children and my family through that, or it's me making a decision that says enough is enough, and we have to empower people to know that they have those options. And then, doing work like this, which is education, learning more, trying to get different perspectives, because there's spiritual perspectives as well. Like for me, when I'm listening to all of this talk on narcissism, my mind immediately goes to Tazkiyat an-Nafs, because a person who's working on themselves, who has strong faith in Iman and realizes that from the religious perspective, the spiritual perspective, you have to be doing internal work to rid yourself of these qualities. Like this isn't enough to just pray, do your basic fara'id or your basic, compulsory actions, and then go around abusing people and mistreating them and thinking you're okay. That's not the right mindset. That's delusional. That's spiritual delusion. Because a person who takes their faith seriously realizes that these are qualities that are not acceptable to again, think of yourself as better than others, to demean other people, to abuse people in any way. These are not qualities that are acceptable in Islam. So we have this whole, tradition of Tazkiyat an-Nafs, a part of our tradition, this whole, area of study that everybody should be doing. Every Muslim who takes their faith seriously should be working on cleansing their spiritual hearts. And so that would mean, well, look at behavior that is completely against our faith, or not prophetic. If it goes against the Prophet's example, it would be something you would want to change. So if you're dealing with someone who claims to be Muslim and maybe outwardly does all the actions, but inwardly there's nothing happening, you have to, again, ask yourself, am I willing to put up with that? Because that's the problem. Their disease, their spiritual diseases are what are impacting you in your life and your relationship. So are you willing to put up with that? And these are all questions you have to ask yourself. Nobody can make these decisions for you. But getting this type of information is very useful because it gives you a different perspective. And my hope is that anybody watching this will walk away with a firm belief, as Dr. Nafisa again explained, that most people who have these qualities and tendencies and who are abusive, because there's the spectrum, right? There's a range. They're too blind to their own faults to seek help. And you trying to spend your life helping them or change them is just putting a lot of pressure on you. And that's not what we're supposed to do. Marriage is difficult, it's challenging, but you struggle together. It's not that, marriage is difficult because one person is abusing you and you have to endure it. That is not part of our faith. So we are empowered to make decisions to preserve our life, to preserve our sanity. This is what Sharia does. So I just want to put that out there because I feel like so many people are suffering, thinking that they're going to, that they have to, first of all, endure this, or that they can make adjustments and change, and then maybe those changes are going to change this person. It has to come from them. And that's really the bottom line. How can you convince them that they need help? Can you? I don't know. But I think this is the starting point, asking these really important questions, right?
I think that's the frustrating part, is that you're assuming this person if enough evidence is brought in front of them that they would see and say, oh, okay, I understand that, I'm hurting you, I'm sorry, I want to change.
Right.
My struggle with what I've dealt with in practice as well as personally is they don't see a problem. You can literally catch them in the moment and have evidence and say, you did X, Y, and Z, and they're so externally focused. And one of the reasons they're so externally focused is they have such a deep insecurity that they can't, somehow their brain, and I wish there was an exact idea as to why people are like this, but we don't know. Somehow their brain prevents them from actually taking on that responsibility. You can go into the fragile ego thing, that their mind can't handle it, but they literally cannot accept responsibility. So you expecting them to somehow see you suffering or see, showing them the evidence of how much they're hurting you, that's going to make a difference. It's not going to make a difference for a person with true narcissistic personality disorder. This is what's so frustrating about personality disorders, is that they're very externally focused. It's always your fault. It's always the world's fault. It's always everybody else's fault, but I can never be held responsible. And so that's what's really difficult and frustrating and sad and heartbreaking, because I know a lot of really smart, wonderful people, men and women, that get caught up in these relationships. And it's very difficult because it becomes so toxic, it becomes traumatizing. And so this is why I said you do need to get help and possibly get trauma help, because the lasting effects can endure if you're not getting the treatment that you want. And I know somebody here asked about protecting children from narcissistic parents who manipulate them against other parents after divorce. The problem with there's a really wonderful book called Will I Ever Be Free of You by Dr. Karen McBride. She's also written a book, Will I Ever Be Good Enough, which talks about parents that are narcissists. But in a narcissistic relationship during a divorce, the narcissist will drag you through the mud and make your life miserable, not because they want the kids, but because they want to use every chance they can to hurt you. And if they can do it through the court, they will. I've had patients that have spent millions trying to fight their partner in court. And finally, this one parent is like, fine, keep the kids. The guy wanted nothing to do with the kids, but she was so tired of spending the money and fighting him over and over again. But the kids were old enough. I think they were like teenagers at that point. So she's like, I've done a good job. I know that they can be safe. And if he wants them, he can have them. And so she did, and they're still in touch with her, but they live with him, and she's finally done with him. But it took that kind of a decision to get him away from her, because he continued to take her through the court, and he had a ton of money, so he could spend it. She didn't. She went bankrupt trying to fight him. So it's really important to find the right people. And in that book, if you get it, again, the name of the book is called Will I Ever Be Free of You? It tells you how to not only educate the therapist, because you think the therapists would all know about what narcissists are, but I've heard of way too many therapists falling for the charm and the magnetism of the narcissist and not believing the victim. And there are lawyers that have no idea what they're dealing with, so they fall for the charms of the narcissist. And so they might not see what the victim is talking about, and the courts usually rule in favor of the narcissist because they are so charming. So educate yourself and get that help, because if you're in a divorce, this is going to continue.
As you were talking, I just immediately thought of, first, I mean, better, but working with addicts, right? If they don't want to help themselves, there's nothing you can do. And you see family members, loved ones doing everything in their power, making so many exceptions and just trying so hard to give them what they want, but they will still, because this is something that they have to work out on their own, they refuse to change, or they refuse to see the need that they have to change. So that's, something really to consider. And then also the power dynamics. To me, it seems that this is really about power. And that's why, going back to what I said earlier about the spiritual work, I think for the Muslims who are out there listening, so essential that this is a priority whether you're looking to get married. Because if you're single and you may be in a relationship that's, maybe you're not married yet, maybe you're engaged, you're talking to someone, or you're considering talking to someone, and you see some red flags, I really feel like we have to, bring these conversations to the forefront when we're talking about marriage, before even we get into these types of relationships. Like, how many people think about that this is part of the, let me get to know you process. Hey, by the way, have you ever taken a class on, on spiritual, purification of the heart or anything like that? Have you ever done that inner work? Or do you have the book? Can I get you the book? Because this is the exact stuff that will manifest in the relationship afterwards, and you will get duped. You know how many people, as Dr. Rafiz stated over and over again, get duped by these people. They know people, and they probably have done a lot of either their own study or research into how to duping people. Because if it's power, right? If it's about getting what you want, there are people who actually will teach people how to do that, right? It's like, whether it's a professional thing or a relationship thing, there are a lot of people who have those social skills to maneuver around, relationships and to present themselves as perfect. But then they end up being complete charlatans, and that's just what they do. And so if you're not able to make those connections, then you will likely set yourself up to be one of their victims. So the way to preempt that, or the way to prevent that, I should say, is that you become aware of spiritual disease, because spiritual diseases are things that are very clear. Again, this book that I'll show you is what the books that I teach from, and that I was a student of when I was learning myself. This is Purification of the Heart. It's by Sheikh Hamza Yusuf. It's a translation of a classical text. 25 spiritual diseases are discussed in this book. He has an entire audio series you can listen to that clearly explains every single disease, and then also the treatment of those diseases. So this is for ourselves to do the work, but also it should be a prerequisite before you are talking to someone that they do the work, because otherwise, like I said, people can always act, we know that, but at least if someone has committed to doing this type of work before you talk to them, or before you're in a serious relationship with them, or even a professional relationship, or a friendship, I think it's just something that we should think about when we bring people into our lives, because we're living in a time where there is just too much abuse. There's too many people who take advantage of good people, pure-hearted people. And like I said, it doesn't always have to be in a relationship context, a marital context. It could be in other relationships as well. But I think that's why, from our tradition's perspective, these are fundamental sciences that everybody should be learning. Because if you're teaching like I offered this class during Ramadan to teens and preteens. Why? Because these are social skills. It's internal work, it's inner work, but it's also teaching them really good social skills, how to pick up on cues of other people's behavior and to know where to draw the line, So anyhow, going back to what our discussion, as far as, if you're with someone or you have someone in your family and you have a close relationship with someone who you think is a narcissist, before you, throw in the towel and think it's over or get, really just discouraged, maybe this is something you can consider, which is, let me try and see if they're willing to do some type of spiritual work, because maybe it's not their fault. Maybe they were raised in a family where this was very normal, or they just learned that, manipulating people is the way to go. So I'm optimistic, and I like to give people, the benefit of the doubt and give them hope. So I feel like we should be proactive, and try to remedy these situations in a strategic and smart way. And because to me, a lot of this sounds very spiritually, like there's a spiritual element here, that it might be useful if nobody's ever considered that, instead of trying to go through the therapy route where, again, they can just manipulate their way through. And I've seen that plenty as well. People come and they'll go to marriage counseling, and sure enough, the therapist is one-sided, completely on the side of the narcissist. Many times that happens. So I just feel like we need to maybe consider alternate options on how to treat this, because it does seem to me to be related to spiritual disease. If you're, abusing people, or you're just so vain and you love yourself to that point that you're willing to do anything to get what you want.
Sorry.
That's okay. If you love yourself to that point that you're willing to do anything to get your outcome, to get what you want, this is a clear sign of spiritual disease. So, that's just something to consider. But we do have several questions that we got. And I think if you'd like, Dr. Nafisa, I can pivot now to the Q&A to start asking you. Sure.
Yeah, before we get into that, I wanted to say two things. If you believe that this is something that somebody has gone through and it's a learned behavior, then obviously we're not talking about narcissism there. We're talking about survival, and there is a chance for them to redeem themselves and learn appropriate behaviors. What I want to separate from the spiritual aspect of it, or somebody that is a narcissist, like a true narcissist, is not going to know that they have an issue, and so they will not be able to purify their heart. They will not be able to redeem themselves, but if also I want to be cautious, and like, you don't want to share everything that you're looking for in a person and saying, well, I need you to read this book and I need you to pray more, because they will do all of that initially. And they will become the person you want them to become initially, because that's how they end up getting you to fall for them. They will do, and somebody asked about covert narcissism versus overt narcissism. So covert is more hidden, where overt, you can literally see, like, oh my God, this person is so loud, is so obnoxious, is abusive, is a bully. But there's also the introverted ones, the ones that are more quieter, the ones that will do everything to appear normal or to appear exactly what you want from them. And then the goal at the end of the day is the same thing. They still are using it to manipulate you and to get their needs met. And they're not focused on, they still lack empathy. They still have a heart. They will still be emotionally unavailable. So it's nice to be optimistic and hope that there is redeem, because they are, like you said, they're charming. They're very likable. And you're like, well, how can anybody not like them? Of course you like them, because they have that ability. But I'm seeing it on the other end, the fallout, when they come to me after they've gone through something like that, where this guy acted like he was like literally God's gift from heaven for them. And they're just like, all my prayers have been answered. Little did they know that everything that they wanted, they put out there, and this guy became that, or this woman became that, in order for them to get you into that relationship. So I do want to make sure that I say that, because in a relationship, it's really important to really get to know each other and extend the time. There should not be a rush. A lot of these people want the process rushed, especially in Muslim marriages, where you don't get a chance to really get to know them, and we don't have the opportunity. But find everything you can to ask those questions. Go to premarital counseling, ask the right questions, get your family involved, don't allow them to isolate you. Those are the things that you can do to make sure, no matter whether they're narcissists or not, we need to make sure you're marrying the right person and that you know the person before rushing into anything. So I wanted to mention that.
Well, I'm so glad you mentioned that, because it's very important to have for anybody who, again, is not who's not married yet, to have those guides on how to better get to know someone. Because, as I said, there's just too many charlatans, too many people who are very good at deceiving and manipulating people. And I've seen many people who are innocent, who are pure-hearted, put their heart out there. And so if you go through a vetting process that's comprehensive, like you said, you're doing things together, you're, getting background checks, you're taking your time, that's the way to protect yourself. But I mentioned this particular, subject because I don't think we are doing the internal work ourselves. So it's more proactivity. Like, let's do the internal work ourselves, and then also encourage whoever we're speaking to also do that work, as just a means of, we're taking this seriously, and we understand that marriage is a union of two people for the sake of God, and that we're going to work together in our path towards Him, and we want to basically do our part to make sure that can happen effectively. So, but very important and useful points that you made. So jazakallah khairan. Now, the questions I got from Instagram, I wanted to put out there for you, because although your presentation was excellent and you covered a lot of it, one of the questions that I wanted to ask you is, in a nutshell, can you maybe, because I know it was covered, but maybe you can offer from your experience, what would you say are top 3 or top 5 like red flags that for someone to be able to know that this is what they're dealing with? Because there's a lot of acting, or not acting, but what's the word? There's a pretentiousness, right? They pretend to be who they want you to be, but maybe there are subtle signs. Maybe there are certain things, flags that you can just make clear for people if they see these things, to run basically, or to look the other way. So can you share in a nutshell?
Yeah, and excuse me. Before, I just wanted, since I put up this question, as a parent, how do you work with a teen on narcissism? So something, like I said, they're the selfie loving people that are just, teens tend to be very self-centered anyway. And so I can't exactly call them a narcissist. Personality disorders are not diagnosable until a child reaches 18 years old, and they have to be an adult age because kids are still developing, kids are still, their brains are still changing. And so we can't put a label of narcissism on them, but teens typically are so self-centered anyway because of where their brain is at that time. So they could come across as narcissists. But I want to know more about what they're doing instead of just saying that they're narcissists. I mean, we can address, if I'm working with a teen, I'm not just going to say, well, they're narcissists. I would want to know what are the behaviors. And if I truly feel that they're very rigid in their thinking, and that's one of the things that is a hallmark besides the gaslighting and what are some things that I said, that they're grandiose, they like a lot of flashy things, they like to always be present around other people that make them look good. Those are the covert, the belligerent, the argumentative. See, a lot of the stuff can easily be confused by other disorders as well. So, for example, obsessive compulsive disorder, people with OCD tend to be very rigid. When they're on the extreme end of the spectrum, they can they have to have certain things a certain way. They have this need for perfection. So this is where you need to go to somebody that actually knows what they're working with, so that they can tease out what's narcissism and what's obsessive compulsive disorder. And the difference would be, again, somebody else asked, do narcissists know that they're narcissists? People that have a personality disorder aren't aware that they're having any issues. This is why I'm saying it's so frustrating, because they're driving everybody else crazy. My goodness, of course, everybody's calling right now.
You're in demand.
They're driving everybody else crazy, but they're perfectly fine. They see no problem because, like I said, they're very externally focused. They believe everybody else is the problem. They're making their lives miserable, or you made me hit you, or you made me get mad at you. You made me yell at you. If you weren't like this, I wouldn't have done this. So those are some of the red flags I would look for. And then also being the consistency, like you can see after a while. And this is why narcissists get caught over time, because they really don't keep track of they don't see that they're doing anything wrong. And eventually by 4 months mark, you get a chance to see their true colors. So look for the consistency, look to see if they mean what they say and say what they mean. And then look, we wrote that article, how to avoid marrying the wrong person. And in that article, we listed some of the things to look for, like how are they treating other people? Yeah, you might be treated like gold, but how are they treating the busboy? How are they treating the waiter? How are they treating other people? Are you seeing them being really mean and rude? And then are they isolating you? Are they supportive of your friendships? Are they supportive of your family? Or are they constantly telling you, you need to get rid of that friend, or I don't like that friend, or I don't like the way your mom says this or your dad says that, so that their way of isolating you and saying, I'm the only one you can trust, everybody else is against you. When you start seeing those kind of red flags, I think that's the most important one, because you can easily begin to doubt that other people are there for you. A lot of people end up bashing their family members, and so they isolate the family members themselves. So then they're giving material for a potential narcissist to use against them, like, oh yeah, your family is this and that. But you never want to come across in any relationship, whether you're with a narcissist or not, that you're alone. You need to have your social circle around you. You need to make sure your family is involved in all the decision making, because this is how you can end up in that situation. Yeah. And then when the gaslighting is the one, I think the biggest one, because in arguments, for example, it might be a really bad argument and they might say, well, you're just making such a big deal about it. Why are you being so sensitive? And you're like, but that really hurt my feelings. And he's not even, or she's not even recognizing that hurt my feelings. If you're not getting those emotional needs met, and you're not getting empathy for how you're feeling, that's not going to improve over time. So those are some of the things that I hope that I answered your question.
No, you did. That was really good. And I think this last point you made about, having, if a person is not sure if they have sorry, I lost my train of thought. This last point that you just made was, I had a question ready and it was related to something I just read, and now I completely lost my thought. But let me go to this question, because it'll come back. But also, this question actually is tied to it, because there's people who are, in these situations and they don't know how to get out. And we have to be sympathetic. Sometimes, as you said, that's what it was. It was about isolating, right? About isolating them from family and loved ones and friends, right? So that's the problem, is that the situation they've created is where the person feels like, well, I have no one to go to. Where am I supposed to go? I have children. This person is, maybe they're the provider. So they're feeling stuck, and they feel like they have to, maintain this relationship because they've been isolated. So the question that I got, which is related to that, is that if you're in this situation, you're kind of forced to be in it, how can you distance yourself, maybe mentally or emotionally? Because physically it's difficult, right? You share space with them, you live with them, they're in your home. But how can you protect your own mental health from what they do? What are some strategies that you have to offer if you don't have other escapes or other means of getting away from them, because you don't have family or people that you can go to, but you find yourself in this relationship with them? How can you protect your own mental health?
I think prioritizing your mental health is so important. Making sure you're taking care of yourself, making sure, like you said, working on your own spiritual part, your own focusing on self-love, focusing on journaling. And if you have no one, there's hotlines you can call for free to just kind of run things by people. Call a therapist, go to an agency. They have low sliding scales. If you can't afford it, just talk to somebody so that you're not just trusting on what you're seeing, because maybe what you're seeing has been, you've been made to question your reality so much you're not even seeing the situation for what it is. So find groups. There are support groups you can get involved with. You can find groups online. There are Facebook groups. There's a ton of information. I know I had a patient that was going through the situation with a narcissist, and she found a lot of great support groups where she learned a lot about the traits and about the behaviors, how to protect herself. You can get ideas from other people. Because at the end of the day, if you're married and you can't get divorced and you have kids and you financially can't afford it, the only thing you can truly do is protect yourself and change your reaction to the situation and understand the situation for what it is and establish very firm boundaries. So
I love that, because I've actually had to work with people who are in these situations, and I always tell them, as you also mentioned in the beginning of the presentation, that this is a matter of protecting your own self. So going into therapy, dealing with the trauma that you've been put through, because the self-doubt that narcissists can really make a person feel completely like they're losing their mind. I've had people ask me, like, am I crazy for thinking this? They're suddenly unable to, they just have no strength in who they are, in their opinions, in their perspective, because it's been taken away from them. All that confidence of who they were has just been robbed because this person is, that's abuse, right? So when you are dealing with someone like that, I feel like you need to restore what was taken from you. And the best way to do that is to maybe work with a therapist or even a spiritual counselor, someone that can help you see that you are not crazy, that you likely were, again, being gaslighted for, 10, 15, 20 years of your existence. Someone has had the ability to completely distort your reality because they're just belligerent, or they have very strong, they're effective in the way that they communicate, in terms of bulldozing and just changing history, rewriting history. These are the tactics they employ, right? They know how to employ, they know how to make things look to their advantage. And so you have all these people who are suddenly unable to think independently because that's been taken from them, which is also sort of an extension of what we just talked about, isolation, right? Isolating you from family, friends, but also making you think that you can't think on your own, that your every decision has to be, through them, because you don't make good decisions. And so I find very accomplished, intelligent, remarkable people stuck in these situations where they've lost all of that. It's tragic. But I think the answer to that is, from a spiritual perspective, especially, Allah, created us all as intellectual beings. We have, alhamdulillah, these faculties that He's blessed us with. And so it's another person taking those away from you and making you feel that you're just you're not intelligent enough or you're not good enough is absolutely abuse, but it's also just not true. And we have to restore that by reminding you of who you are, that you were created by God, not to worship and to just be, you know, at the beck and call of this person because they command you to do that. No, you were created to serve and worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. What does he have to say about you? And to really just build people up again and remind them of who they are, and then do that spiritual work where they can just have an outlet, you know, that they speak to someone regularly, as you said, whether it's in a support group environment where other people with shared experiences can help them, or actually a therapist regularly. But I feel like tending to one's own self is the best way to deal with the situation, not accepting the narrative that you don't need any. And that's the other thing. Well, yeah, maybe that's a good question to transition to. What do you do if this person has cut you off to such a point that you're not even allowed to seek help, you know, to get a therapist or to see someone? Because I've had situations like that. Are there maybe some resources that you can share that are open? You've shared a book, but is there anything else that you could provide for a person who's not able to even seek a therapist or go to a class or go somewhere? What else would you offer that person?
I want to quickly go to this question by Jana, who's saying, is it true that a person with self-love and healthy self-love will be able to spot all these red flags? For the most part, initially, no, but hopefully once they start seeing that they're being treated a certain way, that the red flags start coming up, that I don't like being talked to like that, I don't like to be treated that way. Hopefully they will see it, but we're all vulnerable to being sucked into a relationship like this, so it's really important to identify it. But as far as, I have a patient like that who, once I started like letting her know that she was in that type of a relationship, I think somehow she must have shared this with her husband because he cut her off from therapy. And I knew every time, I was like, I'm probably not going to see her again because he will stop her from coming to therapy. And that's why I feel when I see a patient that's in that situation, I feel it is my responsibility to give them all the tools and all the skills that they need so that they can make that decision. And I like let her know, contact your family members, contact your sisters, and let them know that you're in this situation. If anything happens to you, to come in and help you or rescue you. Contact family members and let them know that you're in this situation. The problem is a lot of times we feel ashamed that we're in this abusive relationship, or we've been told that, well, if it's a man, that's your husband and he can say whatever he wants, he can do whatever he wants, and you have no right to really complain. But in a healthy relationship, you can have the ultimate respect for your husband and he can still be the head of the household and you can still allow him to make decisions. But in a healthy relationship, he's not abusing you. He's not putting you down. He's not squashing your dreams and goals and making you live in this tiny box of a life. So you have to know the difference. And if somebody is watching in that situation where they don't have access to therapy, where they don't have access to family members, they've been so cut off, just even recognizing that you're in that situation, I feel like is enough to help you make the next step. I can't tell you what the next step will be. There are a lot of things people can't do. The money might be an issue. Freedom of movement might be an issue, but you have to make that decision about what you want to do. And if at the end of the day, the only decision you make is recognizing I am in this relationship and what he tells me has nothing to do with me, or she has nothing to do with me, and it's really part of the whole narcissism, and I'm not going to take it personally and I'm not going to allow this to affect me mentally, then that's empowering enough. Does that make sense? Like, you're not personalizing the attacks, you're not making the attacks about you.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense. I think it's a great question. So thank you for that explanation. But I wanted to go back to that word shame, because I feel like there are people who are holding on to a lot of shame about their relationship. Maybe they're the ones who pushed for this relationship. And so they feel like, now how can I go back and face my family? They might have seen things, they warned me, right? So how can we help people to get past this feeling of, well, I don't want to face, the embarrassment of my own choices, but I'm going to endure suffering for God knows how much time. How can we get people to, because it's a mental barrier to me, right? It's like you're worth more than that discomfort that you might face. Yeah, initially, maybe there will be people who say, I told you so, But isn't that worth going through that? If it means relief, it means getting your family to be supportive and to champion you and be on your side. Isn't it worth that? But I feel like, again, shame can be such a barrier. So have you had patients who you've helped, or maybe you can offer some guidance on how to overcome those feelings?
The sad thing is that I've dealt with, especially within the Muslim community, is the narcissistic partner is so good at splitting the family members that when the victim finally comes forward and says, I'm having this problem, they're not believed. Especially if the narcissistic partner is very charming and very, and has basically has everybody siding with them. It's very difficult for anybody to believe the victim. And so that's been that was the saddest and most heartbreaking situation in some of the situations that I've worked with, where they're like, I can't even talk to anybody. My parents don't believe me. They think he's wonderful. And so I'm not able to even do anything about it. And they end up splitting. Again, that's their way. If it's not just isolating you, it's splitting and turning people in their favor, so that you don't have anybody to support you. In that case, you find other ways for support, whether that's through therapy, empower yourself, educate yourself, and figure out something else, because you might not get it from your family. And that shame is just a waste, I think. I mean, in a lot of ways, I think it prevents us from doing bad things. But when it's just about something like this, where you're feeling ashamed for being in an abusive relationship, society has somehow made it okay for perpetrators to get away with things, while we as the victims feel the shame. Like, think about sexual abuse. The victim is the one that feels ashamed for being abused, while the perpetrator gets away, and we protect them. Oh, we can't let anybody know that they did something like that. And so we need to change as a society and change that dialogue. And sometimes it takes about the strength to stand up for yourself, regardless of whether people are standing or believing you or not. And that takes a lot of work on yourself to heal from the damage, to heal from the trauma, and get that help if you can. If not, focus on building yourself back up. And I just wanted to quickly highlight this book, The Codependent No More for Partners of Narcissists. Jana just put that on there. Thank you for putting that up there, and I hope people take advantage of that. There's a lot of books out there. There's a lot of information and resources. So I know there's a lot of confusion, but the more we read, the more we can clearly see the patterns, and we'll know what to look for.
There's a couple other questions. I don't know if you saw those, Nafis, from Qasim Muhammad about narcissistic parents, because we talked a lot about relationships.
I'm going to go out in a minute.
Okay, because that was one of my questions for you too.
Yeah, that's a huge one for say something about working with one. Again, when you're working like a coworker, I'm assuming that's what you mean, Elizabeth. If it's a coworker, again, you set firm boundaries and not personalize what they're doing, but they can make your life miserable. I actually have a patient right now that works with this man that has been, so I should have blocked you. Anyway, has been making her life miserable. Everything she does, he questions and undermines her. He manipulates her, makes her feel like she's not good enough. So it's just, when you recognize that that's what's happening, you separate yourself and know that it's not about you, because it's so easy to fall into believing the manipulation, believing the bullying, believing those the negative tendencies in a workplace. And they can make work hell, but not if you set firm boundaries and establish that boundary ahead on. Because like I mentioned earlier, that they're super insecure. So like any bully, they will continue to bully you until they feel like they can get away with it. Once you stand up for yourself, like with any bully, once you stand up for yourself and say, no more, I'm not going to do this anymore, then they'll back off, because they like easy victims. And once you learn to stand up for yourself, they will not take that on, or you're not going to be a likely victim anymore. And that goes with any case. I mean, I think even sexual, like we talked about, sexual abusers, perpetrators, and physical, like child molesters, child abusers, they will look for their victims. They look for people that they can easily manipulate, they can easily coerce and groom. And if you stand up for yourself and say, I'm not that person, then they're going to move on to somebody else. I hope I answered that question. If you have other questions, just let me know. Can a narcissist actually change with? No, they're not going to change. What you're doing is you're setting those boundaries and refusing to tolerate it. The goal is not here to change them. It's to change your reaction to them and not tolerate it anymore. So you're wasting your time if you're focusing on changing anybody. Even I, as a therapist, don't have the power to change anybody unless they want the help, unless they want the support. So forget about changing anyone in your life, no matter what they are, whether they're narcissists or not. Focus on changing your reaction and setting the boundaries, and then shaping that behavior to see if you can reinforce and reward positive behavior and ignore and remove negative behavior. Bring Usi back in. Hosai. So let's go into the Muslim dealing with the narcissistic parents. We wrote an article several years ago about what to do. Let me show you guys what that article is so that you can go look for it, because we have some really good tips in that article. It's called When Your Mother Has a Personality Disorder, and it's at mentalhealthformuslims.com /personality disorder. So I hope you guys were able to see that. There it is. So let me see. I guess you can't really see it, but anyway, it's on mentalhealthformuslims.com /personality disorder, and it has all the information that you need as far as tips and what to do. But the problem when your mother or your father has a personality disorder in the Muslim community is I focused on the mother in the article because think about it, in society, nobody wants to hear you talk about your mother. Excuse me. Even Walt Disney, instead of making the mother the villain in any way, has always created the stepmother, right? The stepmother's evil. The stepmother's doing all those horrible things. So when you sit and talk to anybody about your mom, it's like, how could you say that? That's your mom. And in Islam, paradise lies at the feet of the mother. How could you say anything? Look, she bore you for 9 months. She went through labor and delivery. You have to tolerate it. How can you say anything like that? But there are mothers that can be severely abusive and can be very hurtful and can cause long-term trauma. And a lot of people that have unresolved issues with a mother with a personality disorder end up being more likely to attract narcissistic partners in their lives. So that's my point as far as you set the same boundaries. You can still be cordial. You can still have a connection to your families, but you still have to set boundaries with yourself and not allow that abuse to get inside of you and affect you internally and emotionally. Hosai, did you want to add anything to that?
I know. I'm so glad you brought this topic up, because this is also another issue that I've confronted, and I still confront. I still have people who are dealing with parents who unfortunately may have this issue, and it's very, spiritual abuse is real. We have to just be honest in these conversations that a mother or a father can absolutely spiritually abuse their children, and these are ways that they do that, just by using Islam to their advantage, much the same way as Dr. Nafisa mentioned in her presentation, that a person who has this, who is narcissistic, may like to read up on psychology and learn about those things, because it's just a way of manipulating their, the person or the people in their lives more. Well, the same would go for Islam. They would study certain verses in Quran, Hadith, and take them out of context, or just use them to their advantage to, again, get what they want from their child. I had one in particular who I was working with, whose mother would just lash out at her constantly and remind her that, or tell her whenever she was unhappy with her, that she's going to burn in hell. Like, can you imagine your own parent, being so emboldened and brazen to say something like that to another person just to get what they want from them? You better do this or else you're going to burn in hell. Like, those words just coming from a parent's mouth is just so hard to even digest, right? But imagine that they're that deluded to think that they have that power and that it's assured to them that Allah has just given them that rank with no question whatsoever about how they parented and how they were with their children. It's just mind-boggling. But unfortunately, this is what a lot of these people do: is they manipulate things and completely distort reality, because that's not true. First of all, yes, parents have immense rank in Islam, and yes, bir al-walidain, which is filial piety and respecting your parents, is absolutely part of our creedal beliefs. We accept that, but that does not mean it's done at the expense of one's faith, at the expense of one's life. And this person I was speaking about, she was suicidal. She got to the point where she was, completely done. Like, she felt really like, what hope do I have? Because her mom had affected her so much that she thought, what's the point of even living? And then on top of that, imagine the compounded fear of, oh my God, I'm going to burn in hell, because her mom was able to convince her that was true. So really tragic. That's abuse, and that's completely unacceptable. So if you're with or if your parent is that type of a person that they will harm you this way and make you doubt your faith, or make you feel guilty about every single thing you do, because they're constantly shoving these verses or passages in your face to manipulate you further, you have the right to preserve your mental well-being, your spiritual well-being, by putting some distance between you and that person. Like, you don't have to pick up their every phone call if they're just going to curse at you, or visit them every day or every week if you know that it comes with that type of just unrelenting abuse. You don't have to put yourself in their harm, in the path of their harm. So I think giving people that surety that, Allah will judge us according to our intentions and our actions, and you can still remain civil. You can support them. Like, if it's an elderly parent, let's just say, and this is like a footnote, but if you have someone who's older, maybe they are going through their own, like, on top of having this, if this has been your experience with them your whole life, but maybe now that they're reaching old age, they may have other issues going on as well. Someone pointed that out to me a while ago, and I thought it was pretty helpful. Just kind of increase your own empathy. But they mentioned that a lot of elderly people who are on so many medications are actually on mood inhibiting medications or mood altering medications. So you might find that they become a lot harder to be around as they get older. But if you're always trying to put Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala first, then maybe that's one of the ways that you can cope, is to say, this might be the effect of the medicine that they're on, or maybe they have, health issues and complications that they just never know. They're not coping with those things well. So I'm not going to personalize everything, right? And that's that's a whole other conversation on spiritual tactics to really protect one's heart and soul when you're dealing with difficult people, is to learn not to personalize things by doing what we call husna dhan, right? Husna dhan is making excuses for people. And there are many hadith and a lot of, teachings in our faith that encourage people to try to become so empathic as individually that you're able to give people excuses, even if they just really aren't deserving of them, not for their sake, not because you're weak, not because you're doing it from a place of weakness or disempowerment, but rather the opposite. It's that you believe your faith is strong in God, and that you believe in His justice, and that you just want to show Him that His pleasure is more important than anything else, that you want to keep the peace and protect from further harm, because sometimes confronting these people just leads to a lot more harm. So if you're doing it from that place, it's actually a place of immense strength. So this is a spiritual, perspective on how we can deal with parents, is that we just put some distance, physical distance between ourselves. We're allowed to do that, but we don't need to go low. We don't need to just lose our own comportment with them and justify, giving it back to them, because we want to protect our own state with Allah, right? And difficult parents, this is from, beginning of time, this is the reality that some people are difficult with everybody in their life, children, partners, it doesn't matter. So, learning not to personalize, learning to put some distance for your own mental well-being and spiritual well-being is you're permitted to do that, but always trying to maintain grace as much as you can. And remember not to be hard on yourself. Allah witnesses what you're going through. He's seen your challenges and difficulties. He's seen the abuse you've endured. And the fact that you can still be patient with someone who has, in many ways, made your life miserable is an immense sign of who you are, but also of your faith in him, because you're trying to, again, prioritize his pleasure and keep the peace. So hope those words are encouraging for anybody who's dealing with a parent. I know it's not easy, but that's why it's so important to have support groups and to have a support base around you, because you'll feel that, you know what, I'm doing this for the right reasons, and I don't need to guilt myself or shame myself to thinking that I'm the worst daughter or son ever because I said this or I did this. No, as long as your intentions are good and pure and you never mean to harm, you're allowed to, put that distance between yourself, inshallah.
I think it's important to everything you said. You can be patient, you can be kind, you can still have good boundaries, but understand that you shouldn't tolerate abuse. You should set firm boundaries. And one of the ways, like with what this one patient that I had, she's like, I can't even like be in the same room with her. It's like, well, go in for as long as you can, and once it becomes really intolerable or the abuse starts, excuse yourself gently and say, well, I have somewhere else that I need to go. I need to go take care of some other stuff, instead of engaging in that conversation. But I also wanted to say the same tactics can be used by narcissistic parents in a family, where they can split you and turn you against your siblings, where you're not, this way they can, when you're turned against each other, then they can easily manage and control you. They can make you feel less than the other siblings, so that you're always constantly feeling like you're not good enough. The other book that I mentioned was Will I Ever Be Good Enough by Dr. McBride, talks about all that, what a narcissistic parent does. And it's interesting that from all the patients that I've had, the common, like when I bring this up, because I saw that in the book, is the common thing that they all have is going shopping for a Mother's Day gift or a Father's Day gift, and how difficult getting that, not a gift, but just a card, how difficult it is to pick a card. And a lot of them will pick a card that has very limited information, nothing mushy, just Happy Mother's Day or Happy Father's Day, because it hurts them to celebrate that day because of the pain that they've gone through. And so these are adults that are no longer living in the home. And they look back and they're like, I don't even want to celebrate this day. I hate this day because of the reminder of what I've gone through at the hands of these people. And yes, no matter what religion, I think narcissistic parents use religion and use whatever they can to manipulate and control their children. But just understand, hopefully as an adult, that was not about you, that was about them, and that you do need to get help, because there is trauma related to that. And so you do need to heal from that. But at the same time, it was more about who they were instead of who you are. So let me see what else. I mean, we do, we're at an hour, and where are we at? 17 minutes. So if you guys don't have any more questions, we can wrap this up. But this is, Jenna said, some people have tons of empathy for others, but not for themselves. And that's so true. We're always neglecting ourselves. We will rather be empathetic and kind towards others than to ourselves, but we need to put ourselves in that mix as well, and be kind and empathetic towards ourselves. Did you have any questions left, Jose?
You know what? I think most of the ones that we got, you summarized. I mean, they were very overlapping, a lot of overlapping questions, but you did a great job in your presentation to answer a lot of those. So I think anybody who asked questions, they were covered throughout this discussion. But I think what my takeaways are, just to remember that trying to change these people is not the way to go, because it's not going to happen. It's rather, can I, asking those, as I said, those questions to yourself, can I endure this? How long can I endure this for? And then if I'm going to endure this, what are the ways that I can protect myself? So that is, again, through therapy, through support groups, through more information, through remembering that these people are themselves blind to their own, maybe they're blind, maybe they're not, maybe they're very, they have intent, right, in what they're doing. God knows, but that's not your problem. You have to take care of yourself, your own, again, mental well-being, your spiritual well-being, protect your children from their harm. So you need to make those decisions based on that, and not trying to change them. Because I think that's the questions that we got. So much of them seem to be around how can I change their behavior, you know? And I think I'm really grateful for you, Dr. Nafisa, because you gave us a lot of information to work with, but also made it very clear that these are not people who can change, who can be changed unless it comes from themselves. And so trying to, again, put them into therapy or take them to this route and that route just might not prove fruitful. And it just means more suffering for you. Whereas if you're willing to overlook their tendencies because there is other benefits that you're benefiting from by being with them, be in an empowered position, own it, say, I know that they are this way. I'm not going to, pretend that they're not narcissistic for my own, sake. No, they are what they are. However, I'm going to stay in this relationship, but I'm also not going to allow them to affect me the way that maybe they did in the earlier part or, the previous, part of this relationship, because now I'm more educated. I know better. I understand better. So I'm going to take my own well-being as a priority and start focusing on on building a resistance, right? On building immunity to what they do. And that can be done, it can be done because you just start realizing, I don't need to, as I said, personalize everything they're doing. I'm not going to let them gaslight me. I'm going to read between the lines. I'm going to see them for what they are. And I'm going to just do what I need to do to protect myself. So I really appreciate everything you've shared. And I apologize for the technical snafus I had. My battery suddenly started dying on me very rapidly, so I had to get the charger. But thank you for gracefully transitioning away from that.
Yeah, I should have done it earlier. Sorry. But thank you, Jenna, for your kind words. I'm glad that this was beneficial. I do want to just end with the fact that the goal should never be in changing anyone. Like I said, even me in therapy as a therapist, I don't have the power to change anybody. All I can do is suggest, all I can do is guide. And if the people actually see a problem and they want to change, they'll take advantage of what I'm suggesting. And so they do see results. But if you don't see a problem and you think I'm just making stuff up, then you're not going to do anything. And that's the way we shouldn't go in life, whether we're dealing with a narcissist or not. We shouldn't go around wanting to change everybody. Like Hosai said, you either accept and say, yeah, this is how this person is, but I'm okay with it. There are other advantages for me being in this relationship. And so I'm tolerating it for that reason. But come from a place of empowerment. The one thing that I wanted to do today is to really educate you to know the signs, to see what you're working with, because I know when I found myself in a situation like this, I felt like I was going crazy. I felt like, what is going on? Why is like, I didn't understand. I didn't understand what the signs were. I didn't understand what was happening. And me understanding made everything so much better. It put it in context and it made me feel empowered and made me realize what I was dealing with. And that's what happens in these situations. If you don't know what you're dealing with, it can really feel overwhelming. And it's just a matter of educating yourself and understanding what you're dealing with. Mm-hmm. So if you guys don't have any other questions, we're going to wrap it up. But I want to say thank you for everybody that showed up. Thank you, Hosai, for co-hosting and suggesting this topic. I think it's an important topic that we're going to be dealing with a lot. And I know one thing I said was 1% of the population has been diagnosed. But the problem is, if they don't see a problem and they don't see, and it's not making their life, it's not causing distress in their life, they're not going to go to therapy to be diagnosed. So I feel like the percentage is a lot more than 1%, but that's basically what we have as far as diagnosable cases. So I think we'll be dealing with it in our lives, and it's important to be educated and know what we're looking for.
Sorry, Nafisa, as you just spoke, I thought of a question that I did get that relates to, a topic that we've both been covering extensively, which is social media and the effects of social media. One of them is that a lot of people have become more narcissistic, right? But a question that we got was, is this something that starts from a place? Like, is there a reason why someone becomes this way that can be pinpointed, or is it just over, it could be many different explanations of how someone develops this? Because I thought about that. Are we entering a new era where we're going to see even more people with these tendencies because of things like social media and the selfies and the constant, look at me, and, self-promotion? Are we entering that, a world where maybe in the future generations, like, this will actually be very common and it'll be so normalized where everybody's dealing with a narcissist, because the causation is needs to also be clear.
I think there's different types. The people that are appearing narcissistic with the social media and the selfies, think about somebody has to be very insecure to constantly have that need of look at me, right? And that's that insecurity that is at the core of narcissism. It's just like constantly look at me, admire me. And of course, with all the beautiful filters, we want the world to see how beautiful we look with the filters. But that's connected to what we talked about last week with social media addiction, right? Or a couple of weeks ago, in that we're looking for that hit. When we post these pictures, we're getting that hit for our frontal lobe that, oh, somebody liked our picture, or somebody's commenting about how beautiful we are, and so that does kind of give us that inflated sense of ego, and we start getting addicted to the likes, to the compliments, because we have such a deep insecurity inside of us. So the way to work on that is to fill yourself back up in other ways that's not physically focused. That's not, your life is not dependent on the number of likes you're getting on a social media post, but more on who you are as a person at the core, and focus on that self-love. So we might see more narcissistic behaviors, but the narcissistic personality disorder, there's a lot of theories as to why that starts. I mean, there's some component of trauma to it. There's some people that are born with it. There's some people that, again, society has rewarded for being aggressive and going up the ranks and accomplishing. And so they just get this. It's like movie stars, right? The people that have everybody telling them how wonderful they are, they don't have a sense of reality of when they're not being so wonderful. I think Justin Bieber covered this, and how when he was going through his outbursts and outbreaks, he didn't have anybody telling him what he was doing was wrong. He ended up feeling like everything, he was untouchable. And so I wouldn't consider somebody like that necessarily a narcissist. They get caught up in the whole adulation of it, but they're not, that's not who they are at the core. Somebody that's a narcissist with a narcissistic personality disorder, they don't even know that they're narcissistic. They don't even, they lack empathy. It could be a genetic thing. It could be something that has evolved over time due to trauma, but they just don't have that ability to have insight and look into themselves and say, I need to change. I need to be a better person.
So just to piggyback off of that, is there any correlation or any research that indicates a chemical imbalance or some structural issue there?
That's the problem. There's nothing consistent with it. And it's not, I mean, I hate to say this, but there's a lot of therapists, like I said, they don't want to work with a narcissist because of the outcome of the therapy and how therapy is used to manipulate further. But this is a characterological issue. It's not necessarily an imbalance that can be fixed. And if there was a way to fix, therapists would not avoid working with them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, that's very, very helpful, because again, some people, when you hear personality disorder, they assume that there must be some medical fix, right? Something that we can do to quick fix this. So I think it's just important to highlight that for anybody who's out there, that these are, as you said, personality disorders, and there might be a range of reasons why someone develops this. But again, not to get into that mindset that it can be necessarily fixable by you or by doing something, unless that person themselves becomes aware of their own problem. It's likely not going to go away.
But I also wanted to highlight the fact that narcissistic personality disorder isn't the only personality disorder. There are other personality disorders out there, and it takes a lot for a psychologist to diagnose somebody with a personality disorder, because it's a pretty severe diagnosis. And it basically says that this person doesn't have the insight to work on whatever. They don't see a problem. Like I said, one of the hallmarks of knowing that you're dealing with a personality disorder is they're driving everybody else crazy, but they're totally fine with whatever they are. I mean, there's obsessive compulsive personality disorder. There's
bipolar.
There's not bipolar, but borderline personality disorder. Okay. And so there are other ones that are causing the same issues, and they have different problems, but the key word is the personality disorder. I used to think, it's a disorder, you can fix your personality, right? But it's almost like they should say that it's a characterological issue, that it's like they're not functioning at the normal level as the rest of society.
Got it. That makes a lot of sense. Wow. So much information to mull over for people. So Thank you again for all of your insights and the presentation. For those who are watching or who are just tuning in, everything will be saved. As Dr. Afisa said, she saves it on multi-platforms, right? YouTube, IGTV, here on Facebook. I'll share it as well. So you can always go back and watch the parts that you missed or cover to take notes. If you want to take notes for yourself from the presentation, feel free to do that. But I thank you again, Dr. Afisa, for your time, for taking on this issue. It's definitely the beginning of a conversation that I think a lot of people should independently, increase their knowledge about. But maybe look to, again, Dr. Nafisa's page for more information. The mentalhealthformuslims.com article that we wrote a long time ago is also up there as well for anybody who wants that. And then you provided some great books, resources as well. Will the chat feature, or is there a way maybe we can incorporate those suggestions also in the post that we put out, right? So that people have resources.
So
maybe
all
we
I
can
can
do that
do
as
is
well.
make it come up like this so that it's
Perfect.
part of the recording. And
Okay,
then
perfect.
here's the other one. Well, I guess it's either Facebook or they're both the same.
Yeah.
And then we shared the other book. So if you guys have any other topics you'd like us to cover, or you can either email me or message me on Facebook, on Instagram. Just let us know. We'd be happy to cover some of these topics and have more of these discussions. But thank you, everybody, for being here. Thank you, Hosai, for suggesting this. And we will see you all soon.
Right. Yes, thank you so much, Dr. Have a great day.
You too.